Chapter 5, The Man Beneath the Shadow. The wind howled through the trees as Cale carried Evelyn back through the forest, her face hidden in the crook of his neck. She didn't resist. Not even once. Her tears had dried somewhere between the cliff's edge and his heartbeat. By the time they reached the obsidian gates of his lair, dawn was just beginning to streak the sky. The world was waking, but within his fortress, the only sound was the steady thud of his boots and the soft rustle of her cloak. He didn't speak. Not until he had laid her gently on the bed, his bed. Not until he sat at the edge of the mattress, his elbows resting on his knees, his jaw clenched so tightly it looked like it might crack. "You scared me," he said at last, voice barely above a whisper. Evelyn blinked. He was scared? She sat up slowly, watching him. "I didn't mean to." "No." His gaze met hers, dark and blazing. "You disappear into the most dangerous woods in this realm alone. And you think that means nothing to me?" "I didn't think I meant anything to you," she said, quieter than she intended. "I was just some runaway princess hiding in a villain's castle." Cale's expression shifted. Gone was the cold, cocky ruler. What remained was a man, one who had lost too much, too young. He exhaled, long and ragged. "You're not a guest here, Evelyn. You're the only part of this place that feels alive anymore." She looked away, unsure how to carry the weight of his words. Then softly, "Why me?" He hesitated, then stood and walked to the fireplace. After a moment, he pulled something from the shelf above it, a small, weathered box. He opened it and handed her the contents, an old, faded drawing of a woman with Evelyn's eyes. "My mother," he said. "She used to say someone would come from light to walk with me through the dark. I never believed in her stories. Until you fell into my life like a blade of sun through a storm." Evelyn held the sketch gently, then looked at him with eyes no longer sharp, no longer defiant, but full of something far more dangerous. Hope. That night, she slept in his bed, not because he asked, not because she was told, but because it felt like home for the first time. He didn't touch her. But his hand never left hers. And in the stillness of the lair, something unspoken bloomed. A promise. A beginning. Chapter 6, Not Just a Princess. Days passed since Evelyn's quiet return to Cale's lair, and though the wound of that night still ached silently between them, something delicate began to shift. She no longer tiptoed through the stone halls like a guest. Now, she walked like she belonged. Cale's soldiers began to nod at her in passing. The servants, though few in number, started to smile when she entered a room. And the cold, haunted fortress that once felt like a cage was starting to feel like a strange sort of home. She didn't sit idle. Evelyn trained under the watchful eye of Cale's trusted second-in-command. She learned the geography of the Dark Lands, the symbols of its ancient runes, the power that pulsed beneath its soil. Her gowns became more practical. Her hands more calloused. Her eyes sharper. But on some evenings, when the wind outside howled through the ravines and the sky turned the color of spilled ink, Evelyn would slip into the modest kitchen tucked behind the great hall. And she'd cook. Not because she had to, but because she wanted to see him smile. One night, she made him something sweet, an old recipe from her childhood, caramelized fruit wrapped in crisp pastry, still warm when she placed it in front of him. Cale blinked at the plate, suspicious. "You cooked this?" "I'm not just a sword-wielding runaway princess, you know," she teased, folding her arms. He took a cautious bite, and then stilled. "What?" she asked, suddenly nervous. "Is it bad?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he took another bite. Then another. And when she thought he wouldn't speak at all, he looked up at her with the faintest trace of a smile, real this time. "You've poisoned me with sugar." She laughed, truly laughed for the first time in weeks. "Admit it. You love it?" Cale leaned back in his chair, licking a bit of glaze from his thumb. I love it, he said simply, because you made it. The words hit her like a gentle flame. She turned away, busying herself with the dishes, but her cheeks burned with something warmer than the hearth's glow. Later that week, she stood beside Cale during a tense border dispute between his forces and a rebellious clan. He hadn't asked her to join. She had chosen to. And when one of the rivals sneered, "The villain hides behind his princess now," Evelyn had stepped forward without flinching and replied, "You'd be wise to remember which of us carries the crown now." After that, Cale's people began calling her the Flame Queen, soft in heart, fierce in defense. But that night, as they stood in the corridor outside the war room, Cale turned to her with a strange look in his eyes. "You surprise me," he murmured. "Is that a bad thing?" "No," he said, voice low and rough. "It's the most dangerous thing that's ever happened to me." And this time, it was Evelyn who reached for his hand. Chapter 7, The Red Thread. The lair was quiet that night, too quiet. Evelyn stood before the old mirror in her chambers, her brush gliding through long strands of hair as moonlight streamed through the arched windows. Her mind was far away, caught between memories of the ballrooms she'd once danced in and the quiet, raw strength of this new world she now lived in. She didn't notice at first the way the silk clung to her. The deep crimson of the dress, glowing like fire in the candlelight. The one dress she had once stubbornly packed away, long forgotten after that night. The same red dress Cale had told her never to wear again. But she had pulled it from the chest absent-mindedly, lost in thought. She hadn't even remembered his words until it was too late. Behind her, the door creaked open. Her hand froze in mid-stroke as the air shifted. Then his voice. Low. Dangerous. That dress. She met his eyes through the mirror. Cale stood at the threshold like a shadow, half in darkness. His jaw was clenched. Something burned in his gaze, primal and unreadable. She began, standing quickly, her brush falling to the floor. "I didn't mean to upset you. I forgot, I just..." He stepped inside, closing the door behind him with a soft click. "You forgot," he echoed, his voice just above a whisper, each word like a thunderclap beneath the calm. Evelyn nodded slowly. "I wasn't thinking. I liked the way it felt." He didn't move closer. Not yet. His eyes swept over her, that dress, that curve of her neck, the vulnerability in her posture. But there was no mockery in his silence. Only tension. Raw. Controlled. Cracking. "I told you not to wear it," Cale said finally. "Because the last time I nearly became something I couldn't take back." Evelyn swallowed. "Then why are you still standing there?" That broke him. In 3 long strides, he was in front of her, his hand slamming against the mirror beside her head, his breath hot, his voice a low growl against her skin. "You test me, Evelyn." She didn't flinch. Instead, she looked him straight in the eye and whispered, "Then fail me." The silence stretched, until Cale leaned in and kissed her, not soft or hesitant, but like a man starved for years. She melted into him, hands curling around his shirt, heart pounding loud enough to drown the world. But even then, even in the heat, there was a tenderness that surprised them both. The villain who had once ruled through fear now held her like something precious, breakable, and Evelyn, the runaway bride, felt safer in his fury than she had ever felt in a gilded palace. When the fire settled and the room lay in hush, she whispered against his chest, "Tell me why you really hate this dress." Cale brushed his fingers through her hair, voice hoarse with honesty. "Because the first time I saw you in it, I wanted to give up everything I built just to keep you. And it terrified me." Evelyn smiled. "And now?" His arms tightened around her. "Now, I'm already yours." Terrified or not. Chapter 8, Bloodline Chains. The lair had never felt this empty. Cale had left early that morning, an urgent matter in the outer territories. He had kissed her forehead, whispered something about returning before the moon rose. Evelyn had watched him disappear into the shadows, her heart full and quiet. But when night came, he didn't return. And Evelyn never got the chance to wonder why. She had only stepped out into the garden barefoot, carefree, humming as she picked herbs for Cale's favorite stew. The wind was warm. The sky soft. Then it changed in an instant. A hand. A cloth. A scent that burned. Darkness swallowed her before she could scream. When she woke, the scent of roses choked her, too sweet, too fake. Her wrists were bound in silk, not rope. Gold-framed mirrors, velvet curtains, and the sharp chill of a palace she thought she'd left behind. No mistake. It was her father's estate. She blinked. And there he stood, King Aldrich, her father, the man who once treated her more like a bargaining chip than a daughter. His crown glinted, but his face looked even colder than she remembered. "So this is what you've become," he said, his voice sharp as steel. "Living in a villain's bed like a common whore." Evelyn didn't flinch. "I'm free. Which is more than I ever was under your roof." His hand twitched. But he didn't strike her. Not yet. He leaned forward, eyes narrowed. "You belong in a throne room, not a dungeon with a monster. I'd rather be in hell with Cale than heaven with you." That was when the first slap came. Back in the southern borderlands. Cale stood before a broken table and a terrified messenger. "What do you mean she's gone?" The man trembled. "The guard said she never returned after leaving the gardens. No trace, only this." Cale's eyes locked on the crimson ribbon in the man's hand, Evelyn's, torn, blood-stained. A silence settled over the room. Then Cale's voice dropped into something bone-deep and deadly. "Get my weapons." "But, my lord." "Now." "To be